Hello, everybody, and welcome to my live stream tonight. Generally, we don't go live stream, but tonight I have a very special guest that I'm going to be interviewing that also had me on the other day. So I thought I would follow suit and do the same format as Mr. Toby Younis from A Gypsy's Kiss does. But before I do that, I want to first do a little call to action for everybody. So as everybody knows, there is one of our dear searcher friends out there that is going through some medical issues. And I want Kobe to put up his GoFundMe link in there. And let me see where it's at now. We're at 5,075 on the donation. And what I'm going to do during this live stream is I will match the first $100 that is donated in this time frame. So after the live stream goes off, I will check it, and then I will do the match on that. So if we end up getting 50 people or so in here, that just really equates to $2 a person. And I'd much rather see that than any type of, super chat or anything like that. So that's my call to action. But so without further ado, though, we're going to bring up my good friend, Toby. Welcome, Toby.
Brother Eric, how are you doing? Thank you. It's good to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, it was so much fun doing live with you. And I don't normally do these live streams much, but I figure I'd give it a go since this is sort of your format, and what better way to do our interview back to you than do it live. So
I'm glad you did. I think it's a good way to do an interview, because then you have to try it 3 times to get it right, like I did.
3 times the charm. That's what
I hope so, and I hope I didn't jinx us tonight. I do want to say about the GoFundMe campaign. I will match your $100. So if we get a second $100 in donations, I'll match it with $100 as well. So
that is wonderful.
Keep an eye on it, and if you get $200 worth of donations, you make $100 donation, and so will I. I'll probably make it nonetheless. But
yeah. Well, I appreciate that, Toby. That's very generous of you. But I really had a great time on your show. Barring the anomalies that we ran into. I thought it added to it, and it was just great. And but I know we were talking at Seeker Summit, and we both wanted to get each other on the show. So I'm really glad we made that happen. So I'm going to start off because I want to, not only do I want to introduce all of my viewers to you, but I also want to learn a little bit more about you myself. So what better way than to get you on live and throw a bunch of questions at you. So I'll start off. This is more so of your early life, your origins. You've lived a very full life from what I've done my research on.
Thank you. I'd like to think so too.
Yeah, and as when you look back at that, what experience shaped who you become today?
I think the most memorable experience, if not the most important in my life, was my father having passed away when I was 11 years old, and the oldest of 4 children. leaving my mother behind. And my mother was a classic boomer mom. She ran the household. Her job was the household. So when my father passed away, although he left her in a very good financial position, she had a lot of difficulty with us. And I I started to rebel. I was mad at my dad for dying. I was mad at my mother for not being good at being a mother, and that probably set the rest of my life in order, as it would, I think, any child that had that experience.
Oh,
It
yeah.
certainly did. It certainly did my brothers and sisters, and I was very fortunate not to have. They suffered more from it than I did, and I didn't realize it until one time I was complaining about my sister's behavior as she aged, and my sister said, my daughter, my oldest daughter said, "Well, Dad, she lost her father too."
Yeah.
And it affected them a lot more. And as a matter of fact, I've literally outlived all my younger siblings.
Wow.
So because of the difficulties of their lives. So
Yeah.
uh, I suppose my regret will be that I didn't do more to help them. But they were in New Mexico and I was in the East Coast and
Yeah.
raising family. So
Yeah, that's difficult. I'm sure that was really difficult on you at a young age. I lost my mother at 29, and it was difficult on me. So I can only imagine being at that age and having young kids of my own. I could see where that could have been very hard on you. So you grew up in Santa Fe, I assume, right?
I was born and raised in Santa Fe. My father's side of the family came from Taos. My mother was Spanish and could trace her roots back to the 1590s with the arrival of Don Diego de Vargas. The Delgados and the Espinosas were both families that came along with them. My father comes from my grandfather. On my father's side was Lebanese and came from the old country and moved to the United States. My father was born in the United States in 1908, but my grandfather, I never met my grandfather. He passed away before I was born. And so it made for a very interesting growing up because I thought for the longest time I was told that I was 3/4 Spanish, not Mexican. They reminded me, "You're Spanish," and 1/4 Lebanese or Arabic, Mid-Eastern, however you want to describe it. And I don't know, when I was about 40, probably later, 45, I invested in a 23andMe analysis of my DNA, and I was like 62% Spanish, which was still
Okay.
more than that. I had more Sardinian in me than I did Lebanese.
Really?
So don't know where it probably came from my grandfather's side. But what was interesting is I'm 12.5% Native American, Puebloan.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
I had never been told that. The only thing I remember, it was from my father's side. My grandmother was half Spanish and half Puebloan, and she looked to me like she looked Native American. And I used to say, when I was little, I used to spend my summers in Taos, and I used to say, "Why does Grandma look like an Indian?" Because we didn't call them. And all my aunts and uncles would go, "Shh, shh, shh, we don't talk about that. We don't talk about that." So I didn't find out until. But I grew up in Santa Fe and Taos. Went to high school in Santa Fe. I went as a boarding student to St. Michael's High School, Catholic, all boys Catholic boarding school. And I was sent there to handle some of the rebelliousness I was elucidating. And the Christian Brothers were supposed to work it out of me. I did get sent to seminary for 3 months before they kicked me out, but I wasn't going to be a very good priest. I guess they figured that out. Went to college, went to St. Michael's High School, went to the University of New Mexico. My dad had had graduated as an attorney, had a law degree, but he was the oldest in his family. And when his father died at a later age, he took over the family business, and they owned a bunch of car dealerships.
Okay.
And so the plan was that because he didn't become an attorney, I was, and then he passed away, and my mother sent me to college to become an attorney. I never told her that I was in a journalism major. And so that I didn't have to go back to Santa Fe and tell her that I wasn't going to law school, I told her I was drafted. In reality, I had joined the military, the Army Security Agency, and served in the Army for 5 years. and then served with the National Security Agency for 5 years outside of Washington in Maryland, Fort George G. Meade in Maryland. And then I spent 35 years raising a family in Fairfax, Virginia, and working as a government contractor. And because I had top secret crypto clearance, I spent all my time doing contract work for the intelligence community, all 17 agencies actually in the intelligence community. Then I retired in 2010. I had just gotten back from my second tour in Afghanistan, and I had some, I don't know what to call them. I had some consultants in the Afghan Department of Culture. I'm sorry, Agriculture. And they happened to be cousins of the president at that time, President Karzai. And they got busted in a prostitution sting. And they were, of course, Muslim, and they're not supposed to get busted in a prostitution sting, especially because they were members, executives in the Department of Agriculture. And so they had my name in their notebooks, and my name, Younis, is actually a Lebanese name.
Okay, and I was wondering that.
Yeah, it's a Lebanese name. And so the Afghan federal police came looking for me, not knowing that I was an American, but they arrested me anyway. They took my passport, arrested me anyway. And I was in, I don't know, jail I wasn't in a jail. I was in a I want to say renovated, a remade Holiday Inn that they had turned into a jail for non-Afghans. And so I was there for about 2 weeks before the consulate had to get me out, or tried to get me out. And because of the project I was working on, they didn't want me back in the country. So they stamped my passport persona non grata. Came back to the US. And by that time I was, let's see, that would have been 2010. So I would have been 61. And I thought, okay, maybe it's time to retire. So all my kids by that time were out of college and on their own, and retired back to New Mexico. And I was there living very comfortably, very quietly until like 2012. I had been doing some on and off work for a couple of the agencies, and I had flown out to Washington, and I was flying back, and I picked up the Hemisphere magazine that I'll never remember her name. Goldsmith, Margie Goldsmith, Goldthwait, Gold something, wrote the article on the Forrest Fenn treasure hunt in the United magazine, Hemispheres. Okay. And I was reading it on the way back, and it's all centered around Santa Fe and northern New Mexico and things like that. Sure. So the day after I got back, Margie Goldsmith, right. And the day after I got back, I drove up to Santa Fe because I was living at Bernalillo at the time, and went to the Collected Works bookstore, got the book. The one that I bought was signed, and then I just started following, not following him in a creepy way, just following what he was doing. Yeah. And because he was in Santa Fe, I'd wait until he was doing some sort of book signing at Collected Works or Moby Dickens, and I'd take my equipment and I would record it. And it was the beginning of our, what I like to call, love-hate relationship. He loved me for the work I did, and he hated me for the work I did. And because, I was a stubborn old coot, and he was a stubborn old coot, we just had this thing. And then he was going to do this giveaway for, oh gosh, I can't remember all these people's names. There was a woman who was a treasure hunter, and a flight attendant, and she developed cancer. And he wanted to help her. So he filled one of his brass jars with all kinds of artifacts that he had collected during his excursions out to San Lazaro. And he filled it with that, and he was going to raffle it off. And we all bought tickets. And I think they sold like $30,000 worth of tickets, which was a big number. Wow. And he wanted to live stream it. And at the time, I literally had zero experience. This was probably 2017 or 18. And I had zero in the way of live streaming experience. I hadn't done it. I was making videos, and I had a YouTube channel, but I didn't live stream. And so I said, I don't have the equipment. And he said, well, see what you can find out, and I'll buy the equipment that you need to live stream. And it turned out to be a box about the size of a pack of cigarettes. It was about $500, and he bought it. Really? And so I live streamed the event, pissed off the people at Collected Works because it killed their internet service. their security system knocked their inner service off, so they couldn't sell books, they couldn't do anything. So Dorothy was really mad at me, and we did that.
Geez.
And that started the whole live streaming. He thanked me for that, and every time he needed something like that, he was doing a $10,000 donation to the Children's Museum in Santa Fe, and he wanted that live stream. But I'd get an email from him occasionally saying, I can't believe you talked about this. And don't talk about this. It's not your, don't think you know me. He'd write stuff like that. But then when he needed something, yeah.
Interesting. So yeah, I really want to get into, your books and your channel, which is very successful growing channel. But, back when you were growing up, was there, you sound like a very adventurous life. So was there a point, a moment in your youth that you realized that you were drawn to that type of adventure and things of that nature?
I think so. I recently wrote a book called The Tao of Adventure. It's on in my bookstore in Amazon. And so I wrote a story as the introduction. And the story was when I was about before my father died. I was probably around 10 years old. I had a bicycle that I had put together myself. It was a little 20-inch BMX style bicycle.
Yeah.
And I rode all over the neighborhood with it. And I thought, this isn't very far. So one afternoon, I packed an old army rucksack, the small military rucksack, but one of my uncles owned, and put some beans in it and some matches and a not even a blanket. It was like a part of a blanket. And I took off. And I rode down Agua Fria because we lived on Cortez, and it intersected. It ran perpendicular to Agua Fria, and Agua Fria led out Santa Fe. You could eventually go to the city limits, and then it became just high desert, sagebrush and arroyos. And I rode until I couldn't ride anymore because I didn't have lights on. And then I pulled off the road and I found a place to set up camp, and I made a fire and I heated my beans in the can. And then I went to sleep under the stars and got up the next morning and had by that time run out of water and realized, well, gosh, I have to go home. Yeah. And I went home, put my bike up, and I walked in the door, and my mother said, where have you been? And I said, I was outside. And she said, get ready for school. Your dad's ready to take you to school, And I said, oh, okay, all right. So I did. And I thought to myself, that was the best adventure. Not that I hadn't been places with my parents, because we did a lot of traveling, a lot of traveling to California and up to Wyoming, mostly for my dad to go trout fishing. And, but that was my first big adventure. And I thought to myself, that was more fun than I thought it could be. And I wasn't scared. I was probably too stupid to be scared.
Right.
But I survived, and it was a lot of fun. And from that point forward, every chance I got, I would get outdoors, or I would look for a way to go. I joined the Boy Scouts, of course, and every chance that they gave us to go to camping or if we didn't do snowboarding back then, all we did was tubing. The ski basin was 12 miles up from Santa Fe, and we used to go on every other Friday. We'd take the afternoon off from school and go skiing, and I would use the opportunity to see how high I could get up into the mountains, even though it was snowing. So it started there. It was probably placed in abeyance after the death of my father because I wasn't able to make my own plans. People were making plans for me. Sure. But it's all captured in the book A Gypsy's Kiss, which was the adventure I took when I was a sophomore in high school. And I was going to steal my uncle's motorcycle, but he caught me. and then he let me have it. And that's when I rode the bike to New Orleans to go to Mardi Gras.
Oh, wow.
And when I was done there, before the police caught me, my plan was to continue on after Mardi Gras and go to Florida because I wanted to see the Atlantic Ocean. So it was just there. It started there, I guess. And it just never, every chance I got to travel, even if it was for the government, I would take it.
Yeah, you sound. I'm gonna have to buy. I have to admit, I haven't bought your books yet, but I plan on it. Because I always love hearing the backstories of things, and you know, I saw you had your book on the Tao of treasure hunting as
Mhm.
well, and that's the one I was going to pick up first, but with this everything going on, I knew I wouldn't be able to read it in time to to cover it. And
It's not the
but
kind of saying. It's really it's 100 Tao related to treasure hunting that I
okay,
wrote based on my experiences and my
yeah,
understanding of the Tao.
yeah,
And because I've been a fan since I was in Asia,
yeah,
and I wanted to put it down on paper the way that I felt about it. And
yeah,
I've written two others as well. There's the Tao of Adventure and the Tao of Cycling,
yeah,
because I think cycling is one of those aspirations that one pursues that gives you that kind of feeling on the road and
yeah.
traveling as far as you can.
Yeah, I used to ride bikes a lot. Well, I used to ride BMX bikes when I was younger, raced it, and in my older years, I would ride road bikes and
Mhm.
things, and there was always it was always a metaphor for life. No matter how high the hill is, you just keep pedaling. You'll make it to the top. You may
You
feel like you want to barf when you get to the top, but you just keep pedaling, and that's sort of the philosophy you take through life, right? When things are rough, you just keep pedaling. Shift gears a little bit, but
you'll like the Dow cycling because it has a whole section to dedicate it to hills and to
oh,
wind.
okay.
One
Yeah.
there's one to hills and one to wind. So
Nice, nice. Yeah, I can't wait to pick that up. So you worked for NSA and intelligence work. So, as a senior intelligence analyst, what skills were most critical to doing your job well?
the first was the first skill is the willingness to look past the obvious. I think that's what you have to do. I think as an intelligence analyst, you have to look past the obvious. And the period in Vietnam, in Vietnam, I was with the Army Security Agency, which at the time was a branch of the National Security Agency, but it was very much focused on the war. So there wasn't as much analysis as there was collection, interpretation, and developing strategies. Right. So
Hmm.
you didn't do a lot of analysis per se. It was speed that counted then because people were dying. And once I went to the agency, I was on the Russia desk. So I had the opportunity to have a more strategic perspective, not only of the relationship between the United States and at the time the USSR, but the strategic perspective of my job. And so I started learning about really what an intelligence analyst should be doing. And the first was establishing the correct perspective of which we're getting past the obvious. The second
Hmm.
thing is the patience to analyze, because getting past the obvious, the first thing that happens is you see things that you, without realization, conclude have merit, signal versus noise.
Yeah.
And so you want to act upon that. And the minute you feel like you do that, you have to take a couple of steps back and isolate it enough so that you can spend time determining, is this signal or noise? And there's only one way to do that. You have to compare it to other intelligence that's been collected.
Yeah.
And that was a great lesson for me because it slowed me down. Having the 2 years in Vietnam, especially, were all about speed. And going to the Russia desk after leaving the army was all about patience and thoughtfulness and not reacting upon what you thought was the obvious. Why I can see it, why can't everybody else?
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so those were good lessons, and it all you talked about it last night a little bit. You used a couple of words. One of them was filter,
Yeah.
and that's what getting to signal past the noise and to signal is about. It's about filtration, and all the tools that you have to filter them with. And unfortunately, one of my regrets in life is that I was born in 1949, and I kind of wish I had been born in 2020 because it would have been a more uh, appealing life for me. I love the technology. I got to
Uh-huh.
experience some of it as early as 1967 or so. I was working with the technology, but nothing like we have today, where we have these tools that we did, and we started getting them. There were analytical tools that we were getting at the NSA that were helping us do our analysis, collecting data, storing the important things, producing intelligence reports, doing something with all the intelligence. I mean, we used to get just off the Russia desk, we'd probably get anywhere from anywhere up to 10,000 intelligence reports a day from different sources all over the world. And you had to do something with that. And the first thing that we did, first of all, it was when I first got there, it was files. And then, of course, they started giving us great big computers, and we started learning how to store it digitally, and that made life a lot easier. And then people started developing tools, and there were people in the agency that tended to be of a technical nature, and they were the ones that started developing the analysis tools, the analytical tools that we required to make connections and things like that using the data that we had, because we had lots of data. And then I
can imagine.
And then as signal intelligence became more important, SIGINT became more important than human intelligence. We thought there was a lot of human intelligence, like I said, up to 10,000 intelligence reports a day. And those intelligence reports, sometimes the majority of them are one page. And you had to put the information in that together. Sometimes they were more than that. But then as we started getting into signal intelligence, real signal intelligence, which is where the agency was, NSA is not like the CIA. CIA collects all kinds of intelligence. NSA was all about signal intelligence. In Vietnam, it was radio intercept. And it continued that as radio became more expansive. And then the internet became a signal and telephones became a signal. So we were getting more and more of that intelligence every day that was legal for us. We couldn't do intercept inside the United States. But as communications evolved, that was the NSA's raison d'etre. It was all about signals intelligence, and the definition of signals intelligence expanded over my time in the agency. Now, there was a point at which, after 1985, the agency sent me to school. So what had happened is I was trying to finish up my degree. I hadn't finished my last year or my last semester of college, and I had a journalism major, and I was going for a photography minor. Because I wanted to be a photojournalist. And I didn't finish that last semester. So I was going to the Corcoran School of Art, getting my photography electives so that I could get my photography minor and get my BFA, Bachelor of Fine Arts. And I used to make pictures. We'd go on weekends. I'd have kid pictures, and I'd have river pictures and sky pictures and mountain pictures and things like that. And one day, one of the officials from the 10th floor came in. I think it was 10th floor, top floor, came in, and he said, "You're a photographer?" I said, "Yes, sir. Well, here's my situation." And he said, "How'd you like to do a little work for the agency?" And I thought, sure. And I thought maybe they're going to have me run upstairs and do some portraits or something like that. And I said, "I don't have my equipment with me." He says, "Don't worry, we'll take care of that." And he said, go downstairs and get your orders. And I'm like, orders? What do I need orders for? I didn't say that. I said, okay. Yeah. And then I had to find out where one went and got travel orders. Yeah. So I went downstairs, got my orders. It was orders for Nairobi, Kenya for 3 months. And I was supposed to document when I said yes, I didn't know what I was saying yes to. And I was supposed to document the construction of the Russian embassy. And, and it wasn't spy work necessarily, because they do the same to us. So I'd get waves from the guards and the workmen and things like that. So spent 3 months. Every week I'd go to the embassy and I'd fill up bags with 35 millimeter film rolls, and they'd go off. And after 3 months, I finished the construction, and I went back to DC. Anyway, I had to go home and tell my wife, like, I'm going to be gone for 3 months. And she went, "Oh, okay. We'll be okay. We'll be fine. Just, are you making extra money on this?" So I went back to my desk, and I was there for another 3 months, and then came back down. He says, "You want to travel again?" I said, "Yeah." This time it was to Turkey, Sinop, Turkey, to see the building of some Russian structure, office building. It wasn't an embassy; it might have been a consulate. And I was supposed to document that for 3 months. And I had a great time in Turkey. Got to spend some time in Istanbul and did all those things that you do when you're traveling like that. So I came back. Nice. Every week I'd go to the embassy and I would drop off the reels of film and the rolls of film, and I came back after 3 months, and I'm sitting there, and at some point somebody came down. It was the same person, some administrator, and he came down and he said, "Do the agency, and when they referred to the agency, it was National Security. It was not National Security Agency. It was the Central Intelligence Agency. It says the people at the agency really like your work, and they wanted to know if we would send you over there, let you work over there. And I said, as an analyst, and they said no, as a photographer. I'm like, wow, okay, let's do this. And they said, but we told them no, we're not going to do that. And I said, why not? He said, well, because everybody likes your work so much. We figured what we do is let you become a government contractor. And that way you could work. And I still had my clearance, right? And that way you could work for whomever you wished. And
nice.
Whoever put out a contract and you qualified for the contract. Yeah. And I said, wait a minute, I'm a journalism major. I'm not a business major. I don't know anything about running business, and I certainly don't know anything about government contracting. And they said, well, that's okay. We're going to send you to the Small Business Administration Government Contracting School in Washington. And I said, that's great. But I can't afford that. I know, that's money. Oh, we're going to pay for that, they said.
Oh, nice.
So I said, wow, okay, well, that's great. But I got a wife and family to take care of you. So you're still going to get your salary. You just have to go to school and make sure you pass the school. I said, how could I say no?
Right.
So I did. I became a certified government contractor. And from that point forward, there used to be a pamphlet. Now it's automated, of course, but a pamphlet called the Commerce Business Daily. And every day the Commerce Business Daily would purchase the lists of government business that they were doing, mostly for requests for proposal. And there were two sections that I was interested in. One was a section for the intelligence community requiring clearances, contractors that had clearances. And the other was small business, because it was a small business contractor. It was a one-person business.
Yeah.
And so I would find something, I'd submit, and out of every 3 submittals, I'd win one. And they would be nice package things. So I got to travel all over the world, from South America to Central America to the Balkans, to Iraq 1, Iraq 2, Afghanistan. And then later, starting in the 1990s, I started doing consulting work with companies who were moving into Washington to do business with the government, but they very specifically wanted to learn how to do business with the intelligence community. And so they would hire me to help them build sales forces that were targeted at the intelligence community. And the first thing they had to do, I would tell them, they need to get clearances. You can't sell to the intelligence community unless you have a clearance. And that can take up to 18 months for some of these guys, because they were older. I mean, it took me 12 months just coming into the service, and so I would just help them learn to do business with the federal government. And kind of 1990s were spent with that. And then we had Iraq 2, and I had an opportunity to go there. And I went, and I was there for 2 years, but on 3 months, off 3 months, on and off for 3 months at a time. Yeah. And then I came back from that, and I promised my wife that I wouldn't do any more war zones. And then Afghanistan popped up, and I had a couple of requests, and I kept saying no. And by that time, I was divorced, and the kids were gone. And so I had this last one for the DEA. And the job was to document the money that was traveling between the poppy warlords and their crop. And the Chinese military was paying American dollars for part of their crop. The Chinese military on the other side of the border, because they're right on the border. And then the Chinese military would process it, and they would process part of it, the opium, the poppy crop, into heroin, and that would go into Eastern Europe. And the other would, they'd process into opium, and that would go back into China. And that's how they funded the divisions that were would be southwest part of China. So I was documenting that, and that's when my 2 contacts in the Karzai government got busted, and that's when I didn't get busted. They didn't charge me with anything. They just had to do something with me, and I sat in a Holiday Inn that had the kind of rooms where they all opened up into the patio walkway, but that was all covered with chicken wire. So you got 3 very sloppy meals a day and water, and then you just kept asking them to call the embassy to help you get out. So That's when I retired.
That's really interesting. And go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's when I
wanted to pause. Yeah, I wanted to pause here for a second before we get into the treasure hunting part of our talk here. It's very, very interesting background that you have, and I could talk out for hours on that. Right? It's really, really interesting. But we do have some. First of all, we hit our goal of the $200 for
good.
Theo. So very early on. So thank you everybody for doing that.
So did somebody put that?
It was on their side. Wasn't able to catch it, but we did have some super chats I wanted to call out. I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, go ahead. Feel free.
3D Bronze, always coming through.
Always coming through.
I'm glad that you're able to pop on. I know you're a busy guy. I know you're busy making my Appalachian footbath box, but we won't go there. And then we had Chad. Chad came in earlier, so he goes the goat hanging with the folks. Football as well with in the Gypsy's Kiss and One Clue Short Worlds. Eric digging the bread. Let it run, man. Cheers, Chatsville. Toby, keep it going, buddy. Well wishes to you and Shelly.
Thank you.
So
Chad.
thank you, Chad, for that. And then we have Peanut Huntress, $9.99 super chat. So thank you very much, Peanut, for that. Then we have some comments that, holy crap, Toby, you look amazing for age. I've never guessed. I totally take that as a compliment.
I accept it as a compliment. Yeah, 77 now.
And Theo, I had the privilege of spending some time one-on-one with Sir Toby. And it was probably one of the most enlightening experiences I had. And I can totally share those sentiments as well there. So thank you, everybody, for the comments. If I don't get to them right away, it's because I don't want to interrupt Toby and his interview here. But I appreciate everybody that is participating and commenting. Thank you for your service, Toby, and I thank you as well. I had a grandfather that was in World War II. He was a B-24 top turret and waist gunner. Actually, I have a tattoo on my arm of him, very realistic tattoo that a friend of mine had done, which is pretty good to honor him.
My father was in the U.S. Army in World War. He served in Italy, and my uncles were in the Air Force. So we had and one of those didn't come home. So it kind of in the nature of our family, we've always kind of served. I don't know.
Yeah. So, you had this really interesting background and life, of course, but, how I've stumbled across you was through your YouTube channel, and it is very successful. Last time I checked, you're pushing 9,000 subscribers. You have a couple videos that are over 200K in views, I believe. Yeah. As I was looking through your older videos. And by the way, I really enjoyed watching those older videos. I was looking through them, and it looked like a lot of fun back during the forest Fenn hunt. But let me know about your the beginning. Do you remember the first time you heard about the forest Fenn treasure? I know you talked about it. You read a little bit about it, but what drew you into the hunt initially?
Well, so you have to remember, by this time I'm retired, and I set myself up for a comfortable retirement. I don't have to work. And so I kept myself busy by trout fishing, or I didn't do a lot of camping. I did a lot of traveling, and then at the time I was learning to fly drones, so I did a lot of drone work. I'd go someplace and do some drone work, that kind of thing, up in the mountains. And I was still making photographs, shooting video. And I had a YouTube channel. I think my YouTube channel, I established my YouTube channel like in 2013, but I didn't do anything with it for the longest time. And then after I did that streaming project for Forest, I got the idea, and I thought to myself, I wonder if there's a business here. So I looked into it, put some money into it, and formulated a company called Streaming New Mexico, which was a portable streaming business, basically. And I had been doing side jobs, side work, with the help of the University of New Mexico. And actually, I was doing it as a favor to the University of New Mexico. And they introduced me to the folks at Central New Mexico Community College, and they had a film program there. And I met a guy whose name I'll never. He had a funny nickname, and that's how everybody called him. To this day I don't know his name, and I can't remember his. Anyway, he wanted experience in TV production. They were doing film production, but he didn't have any experience for his students in TV production. And I was running the public access station in Albuquerque at the time. So I went to him and I said, look, I just got the opportunity from the Spanish Colonial Art Society to do a 13 episode series on their artists, their art and artists. And each episode would be 2 artists. And I need to do that in a studio, and we need to build a studio. We need to shoot it. We need to record it. And then we need to get it up on the public access station's website. And so I'll tell you what, you find volunteer students to work on this TV production. Anybody who's interested, you find them, and I'll teach them how to do TV production. They had all the equipment. They just didn't know how to use it. And I said, I'll teach them how to do TV production, everything from set construction to lighting to set direction, whatever it is, right? And in addition to that, I'll pay them each $15 an hour. And it was about 2 weeks worth. I could do all 13 episodes, lined it up with the Spanish Colonial Art Society. 2 of the artists were my own children, Sean and Jason. And they were on different episodes. And so we shot all 13 episodes in 2 weeks. And I paid them all. But there was one person that was working there, and she was older than all the other. They were mostly student age. And she was an adult, and it was Shelley. And she was amazing. She was the hardest worker. She was the most interested. She stayed after everybody, wanted to learn everything, and would ask questions 2 or 3 times more often than the others because she just wanted to learn. And I was so impressed with her. And after I left the project, everybody got paid and everybody moved on. They were very grateful for the work that I had done. And they wanted to know if I would do it again if they had another class. And I said, sure, that I'd be happy to. I didn't know I'd had a project. This was, there are projects. And because I was running the public access station, I was getting a lot of requests for them. But I remembered Shelley. And so as I got another opportunity for shooting, I started a documentary for the New Mexico, the IATSE, the film union out of Santa Fe, IATSE 480. And they wanted to do a documentary. And so they contacted me and they told me what they had in terms of money. It wasn't very much, but I told them I'd take it. So I called Shelley and I asked her, do you want to work with me on this project? And she said, yeah, love to. Because she hadn't done that kind of work yet, either documentary making. It's different from filmmaking, but different. And so we worked together, and I started kind of counting on her to be my production assistant, and she just got more and more experience. So she was doing more and more things, and she learned the way I worked and how I, stacked my equipment. Like she would tell people, no, don't put stuff on top of each other. And then she learned. I knew that the day I made an impact when she picked up a cable and she did this. Like that. And I thought, okay, this is my girl. So Shelley was married at the time. And so I did this job, this live streaming job for Forrest. And I thought there's business in this. So I built literally a live streaming kit with a TV, the same cube, the same 5 black, 5 red cube that was for streaming. And we started hiring out to companies that were doing events that wanted them streamed. And we did everything from dance events at the Albuquerque Auditorium to we did a anti-war protest in Los Alamos that they wanted. And it was, it was moving and it was a lot of fun. Anyway, I invited her and my 2 oldest children and somebody else who was person number 4. I don't remember. 2 oldest children, Shelley, and someone else to join me in the business. And we did that for 2 years and did all these great jobs. And because I was set financially in my retirement, I was able to distribute a lot of the stuff to them. And we had uniforms, like white shirts with that.
Oh, nice.
black pants, and it was very stylish. And but again, I could see the value. At some point, her husband, Kevin, Shelley's husband, Kevin, would come to join us on these things. And at some point, Shelley knew I was searching for this treasure that I'd go up. She would say, "What are you doing this weekend?" I'd say, "I'm going up to the mountains to look for the treasure," or "I'm going to go." Kevin, not Kevin, but Forrest is going to be in Moby Dickens, and I want to shoot that.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "You know what you ought to do? You ought to make a YouTube channel." And I said, "Oh, that's so much work. I've had a YouTube channel. It's just too much work. I don't want to do it." And she said, "Well, you could live stream it, because now they're allowing." It was what, like 2017, and YouTube was starting to promote the idea of live streaming. And she said, "We could live stream it, and I'll go on the show with you. I don't know anything about the treasure hunting, but," and she's just so damn cute. I said, "Okay." So we started doing A Gypsy's Kiss, and I would get the topics, and then I would mostly just bullshit my way through the topics, and she would just be cute. That's her job, was to be the as they called her, the treasure princess.
Yeah.
And it was just the best time ever. We just had a great time. And the channel started growing. At some point, we were the biggest channel. There are channels that have outgrown us by a significant amount since then, because we got offline. And we were having a great time, and we were getting better at the technology and improving our, I turned a room in my house into a studio.
Oh, nice.
Painted the back, green screen green, and so we had this wonderful studio with lights and cameras.
Oh, that's really cool.
Oh yeah, we had gone to big time with it, and it was a great show. And then on, I'm pretty sure it was a Saturday, June 6th. Is that bad that I remember? I think it was June 6th. I may be wrong, but someone called me and said, and I don't remember who, that the treasure had been found. And it wasn't Forrest, but he had called a lot of other people. And so I got on, and everybody was on YouTube was talking about somebody finding the treasure, and they were talking, using what little they knew about who found it and things like that. But it was definitely found.
Yeah.
So at the end of the night, Shelley and I were sitting, and Kevin was there. Oh, that's right. Kevin and Shelley had come over for dinner that night for some reason. It was like a Saturday. I feel like it was that. Could be wrong. These guys will correct me, I'm sure. We had gotten on, and we figured, well, let's at least talk about it. We can tell them how we feel about it and things like that. And like everybody, we had hoped there was some kind of mistake, or that it really wasn't found,
sure.
or there was, et cetera, et cetera. And then, so we sat down. So that finished up, and we're sitting on the couch, and we're all kind of, I don't want to say I was depressed, but I was like, oh, well, that's A, it wasn't B. B, this is the end of the channel. Like, what do we have to talk about at this point?
Yeah.
And Shelley said, being the spiritual person that she is, so we don't have to worry about the treasure hunt. Let's pivot. Let's pivot. That's her thing. So I said, what are we going to pivot to? I don't even know what to do. I don't know. We'll have to do something else, And she said, well, let's hide our own treasure. So we spent the next several months collecting stuff for the treasure, from personal stuff to people started getting interesting. People starting sending us stuff.
Interesting.
To put in the treasure chest. We put our own treasure together, and it was worth between $15,000 and $20,000. It was a big
wow.
And then we had to hide it. So we decided to hide a proxy item, and we actually used one of 3D Bronze's boxes to the proxy item.
Nice.
And then we wrote the book, A Gypsy's Kiss, which was based on my journey back when I was a sophomore in high school. And that was a trip to Louisiana and back to New Mexico. And we used that story. The story is pretty much fact, except where the treasure hunt part comes in. We had to make up some elements. And then we wrote a poem. We had it translated. I had a friend of mine that studied archaic French. And I asked him to translate the poem into archaic French. So the back of the book had the poem in archaic French. So you had to translate it first before you could even figure it out. And I don't know, it took 3 months before somebody figured it out and went to, and it was really funny. Tonight, I told Shelley at dinner time, I said, the long leaf pine vista nature trail popped up in my Instagram feed tonight. And she said, that's weird, because that's where we hit it. We hit it on the long leaf pine nature trail. Long leaf pine something nature trail in Louisiana.
Okay, so I'm going to interrupt you for a second because
Okay,
this
go ahead.
question's
Sorry.
been popping up
Okay.
all night, and I'm wanting a natural spot. But there's a cemetery story that we need to ask you about.
Cemetery.
Or New Orleans.
Oh my God! You can't ask that here.
Oh, okay. I won't.
It's
If
R-rated.
it's R-rated, we will save it for
Actually,
another show.
it can be told. It was my. So, if you read A Gypsy's Kiss, you'll discover that I met a young woman close to my age who was probably 17 or 18, but close to my age, and because it was Mardi Gras, the last night of Mardi Gras, and she toured me through Mardi Gras, and she introduced me to the gypsy to read my fortune. That's what happened. Mm-hmm. And the gypsy was an old grandmotherly like person that didn't speak English. She spoke French. So Mariah, the young woman that I met, was doing the translating. And so she kept translating and telling me, you're going to meet death 7 times, and each time you're going to survive. But the last time, the number 8, the death is going to win. Right. And so she was telling me this. And then as you'll read in the book, if you ever get around to it, the gypsy tells her something in French, or it's Cajun French. It's Algiers French. Right.
Yeah.
And Mariah talks back to her, and she takes a deep breath. She goes, like, what? I said, what's going on? She said, well, the gypsy wants, I don't know whether she told me she wanted to kiss me or that she wanted me to pay her. And I said, but it's my grandma, for God's sakes. I don't want to kiss my grandma. I'll give her a little peck on the cheek. And she said, well, you should give her some money too, because she's going to pass her good luck to you. So I was sitting at a round table. I went to the other side of the table, and I leaned over to give her a little peck on the cheek, and she grabbed me by the back of the head, pulled my hair, and she pulled me down and gave me a French kiss. So if you ever can imagine French kissing your grandmother, that's what it was. But she passed on a life of it. She claimed that she passed on this life of adventure. And that's where I started naming I had a blog called A Gypsy's Kiss. I had all my boats were called A Gypsy's Kiss.
Now we know why, because that was a question I was going to ask later about that.
So that's where it comes from. A Gypsy's Kiss comes from A Gypsy's Kiss. Anyway, later in the night, we went back to the bar / we were in Algiers, and it was bar / House of Ill Repute where she worked. Her pimp didn't particularly like me, took all my money, and then as we went upstairs to her room later, he came up because her grandfather, I met her grandfather, and this is where the treasure hunting story starts we start making this up. I met her grandfather, but the guy started coming after me with a knife, and the grandfather got in the way and stopped him, but the grandfather got stabbed. We jumped out of the window, slid off the top of the roof of the lower level, and went into the Mississippi River.
Oh, wow.
And we floated down the Mississippi River for, I don't know, quarter mile, half mile, seemed like a lot longer, climbed out, and we happened to be at a cemetery and soaking wet. I lost my boots somewhere.
Oh, no.
I had my uncle's black leather motorcycle jacket on, and it was soaking. It was soaked. I thought it was ruined. And of course, it was the Mississippi River. It's not the best smelling river in the world.
Sure.
Anyway, we got out, and she said that we needed to get warm. So all the cemeteries in Louisiana are built above ground because they can't bury people. Right.
Yeah.
So she climbed us up on this mausoleum, this tall mausoleum, and we laid there. And it was warm. And so I took off my jacket and I gave her some place to lay down, and we were just kind of snuggling. And that led into my first experience with lovemaking. That's why he wants to hear the cemeteries. When he said cemetery, I thought to myself, wait, what's cemetery? Oh, that's the one. That's the cemetery story on top of a mausoleum. Anyway, during the night, she left. And the next thing I know, as you'll find out if you read the book, it's all in the book, I'm being poked by a New Orleans police officer with a New Jersey, New York accent. So,
how funny.
The rest is history.
That is great. I'm going to pivot from my questions, because when when you talked about doing your treasure hunt and hiding treasures, these are things, I've been asked a few times from people, hey, will you ever do one ever? I'm like, no, I'm not going to do one because A, either somebody's going to find it in 5 seconds, or B, somebody's never going to find it because I don't, that's just, I couldn't even imagine. I can't even figure out these treasures I'm trying to look for and cover, right? So when you decided to do that, and that's a big ordeal. I mean, you're putting out there, you said what, $15,000-$20,000 worth of things.
Well, and we put a proxy at it. We actually had a metal treasure chest that I had bought. It was a Chinese metal. Anyway, go ahead, ask your question.
Yeah. So even so, and it's not necessarily because you're giving away per se, but it's a big deal. I mean, you're putting this big event out where it's going to affect somebody's life in one way or another. How do you go about approaching that? I mean, just from the logistical part, like, how am I going to, well, you probably walk me through it, the writing of the clues to the actual hiding place. What is that? I ask this a lot when I have treasure hunt creators on the show, and ask, what is that feeling, A, choosing a place, then B, setting it somewhere and walking away from it. Like, if I hit a treasure, I would be up every night and every morning wondering what it's doing. Did anybody find it? I don't know. There's so much I could talk to you about that, but describe a little bit about that.
So I'm gonna qualify it first. I'm as good a treasure hunt creator, as I am a treasure hunt finder. I suck at both, right? But it sounded like, just like treasure hunting, it sounded like a great idea. First, Fenn can do it, I can do it, right?
But to interrupt you, don't we all sort of suck at it? Because 99% of us don't find it. Right?
I remind people there were 350,000 people looking for the Forest Fenn treasure. 349,999 of us didn't find it.
They didn't know, right?
I just happened to be the guy that had the biggest YouTube channel at the time. So, we thought, like, oh, our treasure hunt is going to last forever. It lasted 3 months. We thought the way you do this is you write the poem, but you put some hints and clues and red herrings in the book along the way.
Sure.
The guy that found it, who didn't want to be identified, and we didn't, all he had to do was meet us personally, right? Because he had the proxy item and we had the treasure chest. And he made us promise that we could use his first name, right? But we asked, what was it? He said, well, I go to the University of New Mexico. I went to the French department and I had them translate the poem to begin with. So, like, oh, well, okay, that makes damn good sense. And then I followed your trip. You put a map in the book of the trip that you took, right, from Abiquiu down to New Orleans. And I started looking at the possible places you could hide it. And I knew you wouldn't hide it in a national park or not a national forest, national park. And so I eliminated all of those because I went through several of them, and you can read about them in the book, right? And then we actually started making the drive that, as much as possible, followed the ride that I took back in 1963. So we started doing that. Along the way, Shelley had her portable computer out, and we were writing the book as we drove. And I was just reciting things like I said, I had a good idea. I had told this story so many times that I had a good idea how it went. It starts at St. Michael's because I'm a boarding student there, because I'm mad at my mother, and she figured out that I'm a boarding student in my own town, and I had to get that out. So along the way, we had all these stories, and she'd say, well, what happened in Texas? And I would say, well, that was the sheriff, or that was the bikers in New Mexico, or things like that. And she said, what about the bear? Where was that? And I said, well, it was a little forest north and west of New Orleans before I got to Metairie, which is where the Christian Brothers were from. And we couldn't find it, but we found this place called the Longleaf Pines Trail Interpretive Trail. And we thought, well, it's a state institution. It's not national. They don't nobody's going to say about it. We're not burying anything. We're not digging holes
Right.
the treasure. And it had a trail to follow. It's an interpretive trail. So we used that as the basis for some of the clues, right?
Interesting.
And then we found this place where there was the equivalent of a waterfall. Actually, there was an image of it today on Instagram. That's what prompted all this. And there was this tree stuck out in the middle of nowhere. And it had been struck by lightning, and there was a big black hole in the side of the tree. And that's where we put 3D Bronze's box. And in the box, I had made a dog collar, an engraved dog collar.
Yeah.
And said, if you find this box, contact Toby Younis at this phone number. You've won a treasure. And this guy was looking for it. He went looking for it. The funny thing about it is he walked the trail backwards. Instead of walking the way that we imagined, he walked it backwards, and he found the location. So
how do you know when you're writing it, how do you know if it's not hard enough and not too difficult? And because that would be the thing that would be on my mind.
You would have to have the intellect of Justin Posey to make that, or John Collins Black. I don't. I'm too much of an artsy fartsy nerd to be able to have that kind of thinking. It requires an intellectual level that tends towards the left side of the brain rather left side of the brain than right. And I tend to be right side brain, which makes me artsy and I didn't have that kind of brain. And that's why I admire Forrest for as long as he did. Forrest thought his treasure hunt was going to last 100 years, maybe 1,000, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think it because I don't, and people are going to beat me up for this, but I don't think it was because he had the same level of intellect as Justin, for example. I think Justin's treasure is going to be hard to find. Because Justin, it's an intellectual challenge. It's not a outdoors challenge, right? And Forrest didn't have that. Forrest was a plain-spoken guy, but he was smart. There was no doubt that he was a smart guy. He wouldn't be the businessman that he was if he hadn't been smart. But I also think that he.
I'm going to interrupt you really quick. You were cutting out a little bit. Could you repeat that? What you said? You were finishing up with Justin Posey, and then
Forrest.
You were sort of breaking up.
Yeah. Forrest wasn't quite the intellect, had an intellectual capacity unlike Justin's. It was more the learn by experience and making mistakes and watching other people. Forrest was that kind of learner. You don't get to fly a fighter jet by being dumb. It just doesn't happen. I never met a dumb. I met crazy fighter jet pilots, but I never met a dumb fighter jet pilot.
Yeah.
So he was a smart guy and he knew what he was doing. But I think the great pleasure Forrest was a fun guy, and what he wanted to do was see the look on his friends' faces when he said, "I hit a treasure and I wrote a book." Because that would have been a surprise, because everybody would ask him, "What are you going to do with all these artifacts that you've collected and all these gold pieces and all these emerald rings and stuff like that?" And so he actually tried to pay several people, including what's his name, that the author that he knew so well, to write it for him. And they'd all say, "No, you have to write. It's called an autobiography for a reason." And so I think he was that kind of, he was creative, smart in a way that we couldn't imagine. Now, at the same time, I'm also of the opinion, and don't get mad at me, folks, my opinion, and I'll take credit for it, is that he forced us to do a lot of work. The poem wasn't as good as it could have been, right? It was just too it left too much to imagine, right?
Yeah.
It was great for that. At the same time, he got out of it what he wanted. He got to see the treasure found. He got to see it found while he was still alive, and then he could pass away happily. And we all got mad at it. Well, not we all. I just thought, like, really, you're going to die on us now? For God's sakes! I got like mad. The same way I got mad at my father. So I think it takes a very special person to architect and structure a treasure hunt that has enough longevity and value to make it satisfying. And
Yeah.
John Collins Black seems to me like that kind of guy. And Justin
Yeah.
Posey seems to me like that kind of guy. And I know pretty clearly that I'm not that kind of guy.
Yeah.
I'm not like either one of them. I don't have the not only the intellectual capacity at that type of intellectual capacity.
Right.
I do neural network thinking. Just everything is going on in my head at one time, as you can tell by this conversation. They can focus all their intellectual energy on one topic that's important to them at that moment, and they know how it's related to everything else that they're doing.
Yeah,
And
that's the key to do both those, right?
Yeah.
Because I have one of those. I could hyper focus on one thing, but the rest of the world's going on, and I have no clue what's going on around me.
Yeah, and I think that's what I've seen as I've watched their interviews. Well, I've known Justin for much longer. I've never actually met John Collins Black, but to me, they're both that kind of intellectual capacity, the ability to focus on something without totally excluding what's going on around them and around what they're thinking about. Right? It reminds me of one of those diagrams that we used to draw and actually had computers draw, the little network connection, multidimensional network connection diagrams. They seem to be able to think like that. And I don't. I see that one little focus point and I start going in on that one focus point.
Yeah. Peanut says that's just
ADHD,
no. Toby.
I've been analyzed.
I have to agree with that.
Yeah. I'm 50% ADHD. That's my daughter.
Yeah, and it's fun. It's funny you mentioned that because I've been diagnosed with it in my early adult years, and I told Laura when we're at TreasureCon, I was like, I've never met such a high concentration with people that are so not only so open about it. That's how I knew about it. That have it in this community. There must be some. A thing that binds us all together on these things.
Well, it all started because my grandson was diagnosed with it. And later on, I didn't know till about 3 or 4 months ago that my daughter, his mother, was diagnosed with it. And she called me and she said, Dad, we can have a long conversation. She said, they diagnosed me and they put me through this test, and half the stuff sounds like things that you do. And it's not negative stuff. It's just there's things that you do. Before you go to bed at night, you fold all the dish towels in the kitchen and you line them up by the sink. Like she had all these things. And I thought, I'm just being neat, sweetie. I don't like messy. She said, I'm going to send you a test. Take the test. And it ranks you on the scale of 1 to 100. I was at 50. And now I look at the things and I say, okay, that's my ADHD. Now, thankfully, I have Shelley in my life who probably knew it, knew all my idiosyncrasies and realized that none of them were idiosyncratic enough to be dangerous, to be stupid.
Yeah.
But she knows me better than anyone because she's been with me since we've been together since probably 2015.
Okay.
And we ended up married because her husband, Kevin, became my best male friend. We used to spend time going searching for treasures. He made all the trips. We made 37 boots on the ground trips to all 4 treasure states, and he went with us. And he wanted to learn how to trout fish. So I taught him how to fish for trout with a fly rod. And so we became really good friends. And he was a little bit ADHD. He worked for Southwest Airlines, and he was there for 40 years. And in the middle of his 40th year before he retired, he was diagnosed with cancer. And at first they kept telling him it was curable and they would take this, and it just got progressively worse. And before we knew it, we lost him.
Oh, that's sad.
And so I helped Shelley get through that. And they had a 5-bedroom, 3-bath house in Rio Rancho, and I helped her empty, get all that stuff. So he had a big storage unit in the back where he kept all his tools and his toys, So I helped her get rid of all that, auction all that off, and then I helped her sell the house. And at the time, she was planning to move to well, they were both planning. They were going to move to Vermont and live with her daughter. That's where she was living with her husband. And Kevin used to make fun. He'd say, "Well, you know what? We can build a little place in the back, and it could be the grandpa house. You want to come and do the grandpa house, because all my grandkids, my younger grandkids, were out here on the East Coast, so I used to come out here regularly." And then we lost it, and I helped Shelly clear up everything. And while we were waiting for the house to be sold, I told her, "Why don't you? Because there was nothing. Why don't you just stay in my guest bedroom, and we'll figure that out." And she was, I don't want to say she was depressed, but she was different. She had just lost her husband and she had a lot to think about. And I was trying to help her through it. And there's certain things that you can help through it. And then there's when she goes to bed at night and she has to think about it.
Yeah.
And so I said, "You know what? I'm going out to visit my daughter in South Carolina to visit the grandbabies. Why don't you come with me? Why don't you just come with the trip? I'll pick up the tab." All right. And she said, "Okay." That's what we did. And I let my daughter know that we were coming out. My daughter had a house with a garage. They had something called a frog, furnished room over the garage.
Yeah, I heard that term not too long ago.
Yeah. And so that's where we're going to stay. We rented a car and we came out and we were here for 10 days. And by the end of the 10 days, we had a deposit on a piece of property for a house with 4 bedrooms, and she had 1 bedroom and I had another bedroom. We were just it was going to be a shared house. There was no expectation that we were going to be husband and wife.
Yeah.
And so we went back to New Mexico and we figured out, well, now I got to sell all the stuff in my house and I have to sell my house. So I did the first thing first, and that was sell my house. And I was able to sell it right away and get the money that I wanted. So then we set up the auction, and the day of the auction, it was an online auction that we had a company do. And not everything was sold on the auction. So I thought, I've still got to I was planning to get a big, truck and just take it to Goodwill. Here, everything. And we got a pod and we kept the stuff that I wanted. I wanted my bikes. I wanted at least 1 TV. There was some stuff. So we filled stuff with a pod. She had clothing. I had clothing, that kind of thing. So the day of the auction came and we were getting rid of stuff, and people would come in and they'd say, "Oh, are you going to sell all these, the silverware in this drawer here?" And I'd say, "Well, it wasn't in the auction, but would you like it?" And we'd work out a price. So by the end of the day, there was literally nothing left in the house. No beds, no couches, no TVs, no nothing, not even anything to eat with. The only thing there was some food in the refrigerator. So I ran over to the Walmart and I got a table, 2 chairs, and 2 blow-up beds. And I came back and set up the tables. I got a TV, $100 TV. So we had something to watch. And we were sitting, she was on one side of the table, I was on the other. We were both working on our computer. And she said, all of a sudden, she looked up at me and she said, "Hey." And I said, "What?" And she said, "You know what we ought to do?" And I said, "What?" She said, "We ought to get married." And I said, "What?" I suck.
My kind of proposal.
I suck. I'm as bad a husband as I am a treasure hunter. Okay. I've been married 3 times before this one. And I was blow them all up and paid the price for it. Paid the price.
I'm with you, brother. 2 times.
And I said, in addition to that, I've been single for 20 years, like an adult man being single for 20 years. Like, I'm going to be impossible. She said, "I know who you are." That's not. I said, "Well, let me think about it." And I was thinking, let me think about it we go to South Carolina and all that other stuff. And about 5 minutes later, she said, "Have you thought about it?" I said, "You gave me 5 minutes. How can I think about it? 5 minutes." And she said, "Well, come here. I want to show you something." And I went around the table and she said, "This is the ring that I want right here." And literally you can order diamond wedding rings online.
Yeah.
So I ordered it and had it shipped to my daughter's house and told her what she was going to say. "There's a ring coming via Federal Express. You're going to have to sign for it. It's Shelly's wedding ring." And my daughter goes, "What?" Like, so we got here. We had a 5-day drive out. We took it easy. We visited all these places. We got here, and we were staying with my daughter. We had by this time 6 months had passed, so the house was going to be finished in 30 days. But we had an Airbnb in Somerville that we were going to stay in. But we went to downtown Mount Pleasant, which is Old Village Mount Pleasant, which is just South Carolina, old money, everything.
Yeah.
And we sat at this restaurant bar, and in about an hour worth of cocktails, we planned out the wedding. And then we walked down the street and we bought flowers, we bought the cake, we made the reservation at the blah, 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 blah. I found an officiant, a woman who would do the marriage legally. We got some paperwork that we had to get. And the following weekend, we stood under a willow by the Charleston River.
Oh, nice.
And the guests were my daughter, my son-in-law, and therefore five children.
Yeah.
And they videotaped it. It's actually, you can see it on A Gypsy's Kiss. It's on the.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'll look for that.
Yeah, look for it. And it was very informal. Then we went to the restaurant, and Shelley had her bouquet that we had made for her. And here we are. 2 years later, we're coming up on our second wedding anniversary.
Well, congratulations on that. Yeah, Laura and I met 4 years ago, and it's funny when you said how she how guides you or knows you a lot for your ADHD and stuff. She's wonderful with everything. She is a best friend, and I could 100% completely agree with everything you said, and I could talk for hours, but this show is not about me tonight. It's about you. So. But it did raise my brow on that. So thank you for sharing that.
My pleasure.
So your channel, I mean, we sort of got off a little bit where I was going to ask you on it's one of the largest treasure hunting channels out there. I think Calazar's and Chad Bird's got a lot on.
There's another one that I was listening to Christy and Mike last week, and they were talking about a woman that is part of their upcoming Las Vegas event, or their last one.
Yeah.
And they said she has a big channel of tens of thousands. And I don't know, it's a treasure hunting channel, but she has a big YouTube channel.
Yeah.
They're the biggest. They kept going after we started doing everything else. We started doing New Mexico day trips. We did gold prospecting. We did a lot of other things. We did, there was a month's worth of, Shelley found out I could read tarot cards. And she said, "Oh, let's do that. So we were reading tarot cards online. It was we tried everything and it was okay, but it was never as much fun as looking for the Forrest Fenn treasure. And actually, looking for the Forrest Fenn treasure was fun because we got to do a lot of traveling. We got to see a lot of stuff in the Western states we hadn't seen before. What was fun was doing live streams and having interaction with the other treasure hunters. And that was the fun part. If I had never found Forrest treasure, I didn't find Forrest treasure,
right?
But it didn't make any difference. I think the saddest thing for me was that someone else finding it ended my YouTube channel as far as I was concerned. Now, Mike and Christy have proved that you don't have to quit after that. They've done well,
Yeah, mysterious. Yeah, Jenny, she's wonderful. I had her on my show not too long ago, and I was so happy when she agreed. I talked to her a while back, and the problem we had scheduling conflict because I worked during the day and I had to be in work, and I couldn't do any recording during that. But now that my life has changed a little bit, but I was in between jobs, and I was able to get her on the show, which was wonderful. And she's a wonderful woman, and I follow her Substack and her everything else. She's got a lot of stuff going on. It's really nice. And then I learned Toby also has a Substack. Man, he got all the mediums on there, which is really cool. But I was really interested, and we talked a little bit last night about AI and it plays into, more so how it doesn't play into my channel. But yours, I really love the intro you did, and I looked a little deeper on your website and the different tools you use. And like I said, I use Artlist, and I actually watched some of the videos to see how to prompt AI to do things, and I thought it was pretty interesting. Haven't sold me yet because it's a huge learning curve.
Right.
But that being said, how did you, sort of come up with the idea? What really inspired you to do that, and how did you? What was your journey like on creating that?
So I have to tell you, every time I say I'm never going to do something else, Shelley pulls out her phone camera. Did I tell you this story?
No, but I know what you're talking about.
She records me. She said, "Okay, tell me what you're not going to do anymore. Tell me what you're going to.
Yeah.
I'm never going to have another YouTube channel. It's too much work. It's too, et cetera, et cetera." And then I started doing this, and she said, "Not only is it a YouTube channel, but it's treasure hunting. You said you were going to never hunt for a treasure." And I said, "I'm not. That's the difference. I am not." Like, I know I'm not I wasn't a very good husband. You've made me a better one. And I suck at treasure hunting. Not only that, I'm not smart enough to tell people that I suck at treasure hunting. I make people want to believe that I know everything there is to know about treasure hunting. So I decided, what am I good at? I'm good at analysis, and I'm good at filtering, and I'm good at determining architectural underpinnings and things like that. So I took my skills and I said, that's the perspective I'm going to take. I'm going to use the AI tools to figure out how to get deep into understanding what the creators have done and see how that can help people. And as a good example, today I went to Gemini, and Gemini is he's my busiest thinker right now. And I said, what are the top most controversial topics that are being discussed in the modern day treasure hunting community? And it gave me 4 of them. Okay. And I said, okay, but you're focusing on the clues. I don't want to do clues and hints and things like that. I want to do the architectural underpinnings. And he said, okay, let me restructure them for you. And he did that. Then he ranked them. He said, this is kind of where you should be, this, but second, third. I don't even like this one, but I'm going to print it anyway. I mean, it's a different conversation, but that's what he was saying. So then I took that, and Chat GPT is my primary partner in building treasure hunt content.
Yeah.
And I gave it to him, and he said, oh, that's interesting. He never says, oh, did you get that from someone else? He just says, oh, that's interesting. That's a good thing. I can see where you're going with this. And he says, here's some coaching. This one is good. This one is not as good, but okay. This is a good backup. This one I wouldn't do. It's not you, and it's not you, because he knows, right? He knows I'm not doing clues and hints. I'm doing architecture and structure. And the last one, we're not even going to look at that. I'm going to throw that out right now. And I took the first one and I said, okay, here's what I would like you to do. I want you to build a YouTube package for me. And he knows a YouTube package means title, description, tags, prompt for the thumbnail, Erica's intro, my intro, an outline for the slide presentation, not the slide presentation or the script, because I don't do that with him. My outro, Erica's outro, et cetera, et cetera. And then we start working on the questions that I'm going to be asking him related to that.
Interesting.
So I use him to build, I use them, because I always take his outline of the script and I give it to Perplexity, because Perplexity can knock out a script for a slide presentation in 3 minutes for a 15 to 20 minute presentation, complete script. Then you take that script to Notebook LM and you say, here's the script, here's the background. I need the slides that go with the script, and Notebook LM generates those.
Yeah, Notebook LM, Laura uses it a lot in her work. And it's when she, I always thought I was up on technology, but I'm not. And when she showed it to me, it was like, my brain is literally exploding. I was like, this is brilliant.
It's constantly changing. It now gives us the ability. We didn't have the ability to modify the slides once they developed them. Now we can modify the slides. You can give them a YouTube video, and they understand the YouTube video. They do a real quick transcription of it, and for their own purposes. So that's why I list those tools on my website. You'll see them. What I call the first line tools. Those are the ones that I rely on for almost every show.
Do you run into any problems with the way they pronounce things? Because I noticed Laura, one of her presentations she had, and they mispronounced one of her vendors because it's a really weird name. Or it wasn't spelled like it should be pronounced or something.
They do on occasion. They'll words like homage, which is spelled homage. They'll say homage. So you have to use what do you call it? Syllables to pronounce. So you do homage with a J, homage. And the first couple of times they do that, they'll get it after that. So I'll listen to it first, because I use HeyGen to generate Erica's work. I use HeyGen, and I use 11 Labs to regenerate my voice. They have my voice, and so I give them the text, the script, and they use my voice to do it, and I'll pick up on them to be able to get the words correct. So it is, you have to listen to everything they do. It's not hallucination. There's words that when you use them, I used raison d'etre once, and they massacred that.
Right.
So what you look for alternatives, he's not going to understand that. You also have to be very careful with numbers. If you say, like, he was born in 1929 and you use the number 1929, he'll say he was born in 1929.
I could see you probably have to spell that out.
You have to spell numbers out, or weights. You can't use acronyms, because if you use LBS, they'll say So it's little things like that you get to do. But if you're using one product, like Chat is my primary associate, and that's why Jason has a name, and he gets me better than the others, and he's gotten to the coaching stage where I'll say something like, give me this, and he'll give it to me, and then he'll say little coaching, he calls it coaching tips. Here's how I would use this, and I don't think you want to get in. He knows that I don't want to get into clues and hints. So if there's something that I give him that gets into the clues and hints, he's very good about saying, no, this isn't you. This isn't AG. He says, this isn't AGK. This is not where you want to be with AGK. And then he offers alternatives. So it's like having a really knowledgeable partner. And the more you do with them, the more they know you and what you're doing. So. Yeah,
that's a good point. I put up K-Pro's comment about running out of tokens, because I made the mistake on my art list. I blew through like my month's worth of credits just off something silly, because it was my first time at it and stuff. But I do like how, and when you talk to Jason live, and I noticed when you pause for a thought and you stumble a little bit, it doesn't throw it off.
Right.
Whereas, you would think I would type well, because that's what I do for a living. And I still am like peck and check and stuff on my keyboard. And there's countless times I misspell. I think ChatGPT probably thinks I'm not very, maybe uneducated or very young the way I type. But was it always like that? Was there a learning curve when training Jason, as we call him?
So your training is one very small part of all their training that they're doing all over the world with everybody else they're working with. So not only are they absorbing new content, right? So if somebody were to announce a new library, for example, they would absorb all the digital content in that library. So they're absorbing these repositories of information all over the world. And in addition to that, they're learning from interacting with users. So every time I ask for something related to, say, the Justin Posey treasure hunt, that becomes part of their memory. So if there's somebody else asking you about the Justin Posey treasure hunt, the conversation that I had or whatever I created or whatever I'm doing becomes part of the response that they give to that user. So if you went to Chat GPT on your account and you started talking about Justin Posey, or he uses JCB, it's he doesn't call him John Collins Black, he uses JCB, and he knows that. So if you were to pump JCB into your chat with your conversation with ChatGPT, it is very likely he's going to know who you're talking about when you say that, because he's accumulating all the knowledge of all the conversations of the world. He's filtering that from the shit, right?
Forgive me.
That's
okay. It's past a certain time. We're good on that.
Prime time now. He's filtering that from all the crap, and they're putting it that into the knowledge base, and that's part of their learning process. And that's where these massive data centers. The data centers aren't about you and me and the work that we're doing. That's a good part of it. And one of the first articles I read when I got into it was how much effort it takes every time we say thank you. They have to deal with that, right? But the data centers mostly are the reason they're so big and they're processing so much is the accumulation of additional knowledge as a result of the conversations that we're having.
Yeah, Lara works for a tech company that they do security for that on the back end of it. That being said, though, you use it responsibly, and I do enjoy. As much as I sometimes cringe when AI gets thrown around, but it's more for the irresponsible uses of it. That being said, what are your thoughts on the AI responsibility for treasure hunters out there?
Well, it actually depends on who you're going to. Gemini, if you were to ask Gemini, if you were to give, what you shouldn't do, if you were to give Gemini a poem, Gemini will attempt to decipher the poem in terms of clues and hints. Chat GPT will not. And I don't know whether it's that it's stuck with the AGK model that we're not doing that, but I remember giving Gemini Forrest Fenn's treasure poem and saying, decrypt this. What's he talking about? And Gemini went straight at it, started throwing out hints and clues, and here's what he's talking about in the river, and ended up in the Yellowstone area, et cetera, et cetera. Chat GPT wouldn't do that. And I don't think it's going to be up to the AI to do that. And I think it's going to be up to the creator. And if you look at the difference between the copyright notice in Forrest Fenn's Thrill of the Chase, which is you can't reproduce this book, right? And sell it. But it wasn't even, you could reproduce it because people did it. As a matter of fact, I did. I had the Thrill of the Chase transcribed, and I had a copy of it, and I didn't do anything. People would ask me, "Can you sell me a copy?" That's the moment you break the law. I've dealt a lot with copyright issues as a documentary maker. If you look at that in comparison to John Collins Black tried to cover just a little bit more. But the one that's most restrictive and can get you in almost immediate trouble if you don't pay attention is Justin's copyright notice. He basically says you can't feed this to an AI model, and if you do, you're going to break, because Justin, being the technologist that he is, knows what happens when you give his book to an AI model. It isn't just that model. It isn't the conversation between you and them. It becomes part of the source, right? The big brain in the middle of all this. And so he knows what's happening there. And I think it's not going to be up to the AI models as much as it is to the creators to make sure they put the right kind of restrictions into their book. Now, I'm willing to bet, I haven't done this. I'm not going to put myself in a position, but I'm willing to bet if you were to transcribe Justin's book, including the copyright page, and you were to give that an AI model, I believe that the AI model said, based on the copyright notice at the very front of this book, I'm limited in what I could do.
Yeah.
And I think
so that's their way of policing it. Then.
That's their way of what they're doing is policing it based on what the creator has decided what to do with it. And I think the creators are going to get progressively, I don't want to say they're smarter, they're all smart, but they're going to get,
I know what you mean.
Progressively more protective of their work isolating it as much as they can from the AI model. That doesn't mean it's going to stop anybody who wants to go ahead and transcribe it and give it to an AI model what to do.
Sure.
But you're going to get caught, because the minute it's out there, if Justin is, I believe Justin is smart enough to know when his book has made it into the AI subculture.
Yeah.
He'll be able to say it's happened. I don't know if he'd be able to track it down, but I'm willing to bet he's going to be able to find out how it got there. Now it's different. Say the Jibal, I think it's called, which is basically the work of the individuals who are searching for it without getting into specific. I don't think. I think it falls into that limited use doctrine of the copyright law, where you can say, well, he said this. What does that mean? And how do you interpret it? And you put that all in the Jibal. That's very different from saying, here's chapter 10 of Justin's book.
Right. Yeah.
And I think sooner or later, if someone were to do that and feed it into AI, it goes into the equivalent of a central repository. That's a childish way to describe it, but that's what's happening. And eventually, I'm sure a creator could look into that same library that you fed it into and find it. And I don't know if it could track you down or not, but I'm willing to bet there's some smart people that Justin knows that could.
Yeah, using the same AI.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's the problem you run into, right?
And I think that's what I think some authors, based on the advice of their attorneys and their publishers, will start doing things like that. So, because it's going to get progressively easier to duplicate the work and give it in. I think the treasure hunters are kind of in a different class of publisher, because they're treasure hunt creators. And so I think as more treasure hunt creators publish books about the perspectiveness of their treasure hunt, the copyright restrictions, the restrictions in the front of the book, will get progressively longer and more restrictive as they relate to the utilization, the readers, the buyers' utilization of the content of the book.
Yeah, it's almost like turning your words of your book into a QR code. So once it's fed in there, it'll.
Yeah.
Now, how do you think AI handles different things? So I did do a little research to see what is out there, because there's a lot of people that do puzzles and games and things of that nature, and AI could be helpful in creating those things. And when upon my research recently, I saw there was an AI that was dedicated solely for riddles, right? So that would, that's the way I sort of look at John's Forrest Fenn poem, because I don't use AI for these things, because really the way I look at it is it's really just scanning what the consensus is across the web, and that doesn't help me out a lot. Anyway, so but how do you think it would approach, unless you had a specifically trained AI, because really it's just doing what you're training it to do still. It's not, it's not sentient, and not yet at least, but that's for another topic, for another show. But how would it discern, say for sake of argument, that John set up the Forrest Fenn poem, not necessarily like, okay, you find these different locations because they are representing where you need to look, or instead he set it up as, if you can interpret these words, it will take you to a place that is what it's supposed to be, if that makes sense. I'm probably doing a horrible job of explaining this, what I'm trying to say, but using like I don't know, maybe metaphors or wordplay, because what AI is looking for is what logical place could warm waters halt mean, or cool water flows. Well, it probably scans every directory out there and saying, well, cool water, it comes from snow, and you can melt, whatever, and pointing to a location. Instead, it could mean something that represents that cool water, which then it's like a third layer into it.
So AI is an extension of what information technology has always been. There's a core, right? There was back in the olden days, it was a database, right? There was a database. And then on top of that database was a language that enabled you to communicate with that database. And then the language could be anything from COBOL to deeper SQL, where it was directly associated with database. And you'd write COBOL or one of the other languages, and you'd write the SQL instructions that would activate the database. The simple fact of the matter is that the difference between what that database used to do and the way that database operated is not much different from the way AI does, except that the database has become massive and it's not limited to structure. It's an unstructured information universe where every item has access to every item, but you're still communicating with it. So their communication is a natural language called the prompt. You write it in English or you write it in Chinese. You're not writing, you don't think you're writing code when you write a prompt. Give me a YouTube thumbnail that looks like this and it has this text in it, stuff like that. You're writing program code to do that. Then somebody says, you know what, why don't I just write some code using one of the coded languages and create a layer on top of the AI that's designed to create thumbnails. And I have a tool called Content 360, and it uses AI to distribute my shorts to all my social media assets. Okay. Now I could do it one at a time if I wanted to, but this AI with a prompt lets me upload my shorts for the week, and then I just press some buttons and it writes the code necessary to put those into those assets every day differently. So the concepts are all the same. There's a coded language, there's a language on top of that, there's an API on top of that, there's coded language. It's all the same thing. So what you're doing when you're writing a prompt, and there's whole courses on how to write prompts to tell there's a beautiful course on how to generate video because video has gotten so good. I just saw a video. It was just so beautifully done. It was amazingly done. It looked like it was produced in a video production house, right?
Yeah.
And it was the trailer of the Iran war, how the Iran war came about, and Liam Neeson was playing Donald Trump. They had all these characters. Scarlett Johansson was playing Pam Bondi, and it was all AI, right? And you can tell it's AI because the clips are from 5 to 10 seconds. That's about after that, you start using up your tokens real quick.
Your tokens, right? Keypro is going to be broke after.
Anyway, the concept is all the same. It's one language on top of another language on top of another language, or an API, application programming interface, that says, you know what all these treasure hunters are looking for? They're looking for a way to solve riddles. So you write an API, riddle solving API, and in that code that you're writing, you tell it what you mean by riddle and solving and all this other thing. And then when you say, I need to solve this riddle, you get a response that says, hey, we now have a riddle solving chat that you can do this in, AI that does this. And it's not new AI. It's down at the bottom. It's the core of GPT, and it's chat is not the name of it. GPT is the name of it, or Gemini or Perplexity or whichever one they want, Kimi 2. And then somebody has written something on top of it. There's book writing. There's book writing APIs. And they call them AI, right? There's Content 360 API. I found one yesterday. I was looking to count words in this thing that I was publishing, and I had a limitation of 2,000 words, and I entered word counter, and I ended up in something called, I have to look at it, it's called like Just Done, something like that. And it has all these tools that look like they were designed for college students. Word counting, change my dissertation so it sounds, to humanize it. Tell me, does this look like AI or not? It looks like it was written for a college student, but it's just a layer of API, application programming interface, on top of the same engine that these guys have made available free to anyone.
So that being said, do you think AI changes what it means to earn your solve if you're looking for a treasure hunt?
I think that depending on the model that you're using, And if I was looking for a treasure hunt in the United States, I would use a model that was developed in the United States. Kimmy K2 is a great model, but I don't think it knows anything about American treasure hunters, right? Other than what it can read in Google, you know.
Yeah.
I think they will evolve to understand that treasure hunters have certain needs, requirements that go deeper than where. Tell me as much as you can about Justin Posey's life history, right? Because you could go through his life history, and his life history would tell us. Well, eventually, what becomes part of that life history? Imagine if someone went and entered the book and I'm not recommending anyone do this. As a matter of fact, it'll probably put you in big trouble if you do, because he's very specifically stated at the front of his book that you can't do this. But eventually that'll become part of his life story. So they go closer and closer to understanding what it was. And it's just up to them. There is probably nothing in AI right now. Well, if you were to say to AI, what's the best way, I don't even think I want to use one of these. What's the best way to kill my neighbor's dog? And I don't want it. I want you to know I love dogs and I'm not killing. But there's a point that crosses the ethical line for them.
Yeah.
Right. They're not going to help you commit a crime unless you can hide what you're doing well enough for them to not imagine that it's a crime. What's the best way to rob a bank? I think you're going to get some cautionary words from AI. I can't help you do that. That's how do I assassinate the leader of Iran?
Yeah.
It's not going to help you. So eventually it's going to figure out that there's some of these areas that may not look unethical to them. Oh, he's just asking about solving a riddle, right? Well, that solving the riddle may get them closer to a treasure that other people who are not using that, then you can make a justification. Well, hey, I used the tool, you didn't, right?
Yeah.
So that's where the ethical conversation in artificial intelligence is. Like, where's the line? How do you draw the line? And humans have the same problem. I mean, we make laws based on which lines we cross, right? We don't know that those lines exist. We cross them, and somebody says, wait, we can't let you do that. That's a crime. So they make a new law that covers this. Same thing is happening to AI. People will keep trying to do this until somebody whose job it is to note ethical boundaries of some kind, to notice that, wait a minute, they keep asking about these riddles related to treasure hunts. That's not fair. That's cheating.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know if that's true. I just know well enough that there are people whose responsibility it is in each one of these companies that are the developers of the AI engine to watch for ethical issues, because the last thing that they need is a product that doesn't know the difference between good ethics and no ethics.
It's almost like you're starting a whole new civilization again.
That's a very good description, because they're learning how to be civilized, right? One of the things about becoming a new civilization is you break all the rules, and because there are no rules,
and then establish rules, right?
Yeah,
you have to
so
break them to establish them.
You start defining what is ethical, what is legal, what is ethical, and what is not. And they're doing the same thing. They're building a civilization, and hopefully they get to the point where they don't feel like these people are too stupid for them to be around. Let's fix that.
Yeah, that's getting real deep on a Friday night here.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I could do this for hours. Trust me.
Well, we should plan on maybe doing a live stream together on AI and stuff.
Anytime I can share.
But that being said, and we'll start wrapping it up here. I do have one last question for you. Is where do you think treasure hunting will be in, say, the next 5 years?
What I'm hoping for is that we have a lot more creators than we do now. I think it becomes interesting now. I'm going to qualify this. I'm 77 years old. I am not going the last time I was out in the field I was much younger, and I was still tripping over boulders. Right. I'm not going out again. I have no reason to think that I can go out. So I'm going to stay at the level I'm at. I'm going to do analysis and interpretation and filtering and signal versus noise. But I hope for my channel as much as for your channel and for Christy and Mike's channel, that we get more creators like Chad Bird and Chris Dodson, who are willing to take the risk and make the adventure of hiding more treasures. The more treasures that are hidden, I think the more fun it is for everybody. And I think it gives everybody a chance to finally win something, you know.
Yeah.
That would be, if I were to pass away, and at the time I passed away, there were 20 what I call modern day treasure hunts out there, that would be perfect. It was okay when it was only Forest Fenn. There was others. There was The Secret, and I know Christy and Mike track. What is it that they call it? The treasure hunt circus,
amusement park,
amusement park.
And they have a great website that Mike just
right
did,
and there are I don't know, there's got to be dozens of them out there as there is now. Some of them are smaller, and some of them don't get the publicity that the bigger ones do. John Collins Black has been real good. Justin, of course, had the natural publicity of just his personality and having the relationship with the Forest Fenn treasure hunt that he did. But I would hope that we just get more treasure hunt creators that realize the excitement that it creates in the community, that there's a built-in community of treasure hunters already that aren't going to go deep diving off the coast of Cuba to look for a galleon, but they will travel from like you did, from Illinois to Pennsylvania to look for treasure. And there are others that, we know Forrest used to brag that he thought there were 350,000 people looking for his treasure. So I hope they're out there looking for treasure, because there's more treasure hunters putting out treasure that are challenging, that are interesting, and that have real rewards in the same way that Chad Bird has, and the same way that Chris Dodson has. I think they've taken the lessons that they learned from the Forest Fenn hunt, and they've, done the best they could to satisfy the needs of the treasure hunting community.
Yeah, well, that's very well said, because that's what we're here for, right? We're here to talk about. And I had Quill and Compass reach out to me recently, and I'm hoping to get them on as well. I know Vale has been doing stuff. I signed up for one of Vale's treasure hunts, because one of them's literally right over my house. So there's circle on it. But I don't want to miss Kobe. My moderator said there's some more questions. If you had some time to answer some questions that were in the chat, and I didn't have a chance to bring them up earlier because I didn't want to interrupt. But Kobe, if you can give me those questions that you wanted answered in the chat, I'll pose them to Toby. It's hard because your name's Toby, his name is Kobe. So I go Kobe, Toby.
Kobe and Toby working together to get these questions answered. Yeah. I told Shelly that I was going to be late tonight, so not to wait for me. We usually spend the last part of our night watching the funnies, we call them.
Nice. So he goes, Sneaky asks, how many hunts has Toby been involved with? And that's the first part of the question. So I'll let you answer the first part.
So if you, by involved, you mean actually looking for the treasure, the only one that I've ever been involved with is the Forest Fenn Thrill of the Chase treasure hunt. The only other treasure hunt that I've been involved in is the one that we formulated, Gypsy's Kiss treasure hunt. I have never found a treasure. Oh, wait a minute. I lied to you, not intentionally. In the book, if you get the book of the Tao of the Treasure, I'm not going to tell you the story. You got to buy the book. In the introduction of the book, it tells you very specifically about the treasure I did find.
Very good.
The only treasure in my life I have ever found, but you'll have to get the book.
Well, I'm going to get the book after this interview. I'm going to make my donation again to Theo, and then I'm going to go on Amazon and get the book. And then we have, we have another one here. Oops. Any thoughts on becoming an armchair treasure maker, Toby?
I have. I think I've used up my points of understanding with Shelley. I think she lets me do my treasure hunting thing that takes several hours a week. It doesn't interrupt anything else we do. I'm not doing it to the exclusion of tomorrow morning we'll get up. We're not going treasure hunting. We're going to the Somerville Farmers Market.
Yeah.
So I don't think I like what I'm doing. I I'm confident that it provides a treasure hunting related service, even though we're not giving out clues and hints. And I'm happy with that. And I'm 77 years old, and I don't feel like I'm at a point in my life where I can start something new, like, hey, let's do another treasure hunt kind of thing. I probably not is the short answer.
Yeah. You're 77 years young, Toby.
I'll try to remember that when I get up in the morning.
That's right.
And everything creaks.
We have another question. Todd asked if Toby has any thoughts on an autobiography. He would love an audiobook about Toby, read by Toby. That's great.
So all my children and all my wives have said you need to write an autobiography, and the amount of patience that it takes is beyond this poor ADHD person. I have considered it, and I've tried to do it in certain ways, like some of the books that I'm doing now. I'm working on some novels that will help tell my story, because I've incorporated my life into the stories of the novels. But there just seems like I don't know. I don't know. The people that you read, the autobiographies I've read in my life, the autobiographies that I've written, were by people who have accomplished things that went beyond the ordinary. The autobiographies by any of the presidents, I'll read any of those. The autobiographies of great scientists, I love reading those, or even biographies of great scientists.
Yeah.
I'm reading a book right now that's about the relationship between Vermeer, the artist, the Dutch artist Vermeer, and I'm not going to be able to pronounce his name, Van Leeuwenthal. They lived in the same town, Delft, it wasn't called Holling at that point. And Vermeer was a painter, but it is claimed that he used a lot of optical devices to do the paintings because they're so perfect, so precise. They concluded he had to use these optics to be able to do that. And this was in the 1600s. The other guy invented the microscope, the first usable microscope.
Oh, okay.
And so the storyline is about they lived in the same town at the same time. And they concluded they had to know each other, so they were trading back and forth. It's a history book more than it is anything. And these are great people, right? I don't think of myself as a great person. I don't think I have an interesting biography that I'm not even sure my children would read. I don't think any of my children have read A Gypsy's Kiss.
Yeah, I don't think my kids watch my channel either.
No, they don't. No, as a matter of fact, I see them and they go, "Are you still looking for treasure?" No.
I always give my kids a hard time. I hid clues to your inheritance in my YouTube channels, and all you have to do upon my passing is to watch every one of them.
That's good. I think I'll have to do that.
We do have one last question. Yeah, Todd also asked, what has been your best / favorite hunt?
Well, I'll have to say, as I said, the only hunt I've ever participated in was the thrill of the chase. And that was fun and it was great, but it was the only one. If I were to take one on right now, I would love to do Justin's hunt, just because I like Justin a lot. I think he's a great man. And I think he's taken a lot of the lessons that from the forced Fenn treasure hunt to make sure that his treasure hunt doesn't experience the same issues. And he's just such a good guy. And I think if I were to invest any time in resolving a treasure hunt, it would be Justin's. But again, at 70, I'm my excitement is getting on my bike every afternoon and going for a 10-mile ride, and I'm good.
That's wonderful. But I am going to pick your brain at some point on the Forrest Fenn poem as I get closer. So,
well, you wait a minute, and I'm the wrong guy for that. I was
oh
one of the
no, you're not, because
349,000.
you're close. No,
What
no,
I
I'm
should
just,
do is
yeah,
I should take the Forrest Fenn treasure hunt and start doing it with AI and see what it resolves, see what it comes up with.
yeah.
Because I
Well,
think that would
well,
be
you do that, and then I'll have you on. We'll compare notes to
okay.
where I'm going with it.
Uh,
But
I am still criticized for all the warm waters halts and the Rio de los Pinos and the New Mexico state fishing regulations, and I just the thought, like, he lived in New Mexico. Why would he hide it anyplace else? We made the
yeah,
trips that we did. We visited 37 boots on the ground. We visited Colorado, Wyoming, several locations, Montana, Colorado, several locations, a dozen locations in New Mexico. And I, although we went through Yellowstone, I thought it was on the Madison someplace. I really
yeah,
believed that it was on the Madison, but that whole it's far, but not too far to walk or something like that. It was just like,
yeah.
how do what you need something other than my kind of brain to figure that stuff out.
Well, my locations in your neck of the woods where you lived once, so in New Mexico,
Yeah.
and I'm getting closer to trying to figure things out here. And
You mean for the JCB Forest Fenn?
yes, for the JCB one. So when I get to that point, I will
Well,
be calling you up.
I've done a couple of videos on the JCB treasure hunt, including comparing it to Forest Fenn. So I'll send you
Yeah.
links to those videos.
Yeah, I will check them out, but my approach is a little different on it, and I'm trying to test them. I'm in beta, alpha and beta testing modes now. But thank you so much, Toby, and you could stick around when we get off live here. But
Can I just add something?
Yeah.
You all know my YouTube channel is a Gypsy's Kiss.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Yeah,
that's okay.
Right.
There are two websites, Toby Younis or tunis.com. And what you'll find there are all the tools that I use I just built it out of solo.to so that I could go quickly to click on the, but you'll see all the tools categorized by what they are, the first line tools, the pre-production, post-production, audio and video, etc. So it's all classified. And then gypsieskiss.com is where we maintain all the Gypsy's Kiss information, from transcriptions to our last 10 videos to infographics to our other social media. We have YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, and Substack. So
yeah, and you also have your Amazon with your books on there too.
We do have it. Yeah. We actually have an Amazon store that I don't talk about much more because it has all our technical stuff. It has the lights that I use, the microphones and receivers that I use, that kind of stuff. So we don't.
That's what I always find interesting. So one day I'll put some of mine up there, but I was like looking at gear.
Yeah, so I've always wanted to have a show or a channel that just talked about the gear that I buy and use, because I just bought a new drone actually.
Yeah,
because they were
my DJI with before they go ahead and abolish it and make it illegal to own, right?
They'll work it. I mean, they've gotten around it by giving it. This is one of those 250-gram drones.
That's mine is.
And I still have one of the older ones that I can fly because they're grandfathered in. And then I have the DJI. What's a little tiny one?
Yeah, the FPV.
No, it's not FPV. It's a little handheld. Like.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It's not the Osmo. I have a lot of DJI product about both drones and cameras and stuff like that.
I like their stuff.
I've always, you pay more than you should for it, but but it's always good stuff, and they have great warranties, and they're really good about their support.
Yeah. Well, Toby, thank you so much again, and thank everybody for stepping up and hitting our goal for Theo. Once I get off, I'll go ahead and make that contribution to that. And Toby, if you want to stick around after my outro goes, and we'll wrap it up here. And yeah, make sure to go visit Toby's YouTube. It's got some really good videos. And if you want some nostalgic, filter them from the oldest to the newest. That's what I did.
Yeah, they go. They go as far back as Forrest Fenn, back to 2017.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I do that also with Kalazars too, because it's history, right? It's great stuff.
Oh, it's great stuff because it was so much fun, and we were having fun with it. You know, it was just a good time, and you get to see the Treasure Princess, and and Shelley has her own channel. If you like the spiritual stuff, go to Vibrations and Manifestations. That's Shelley's channel.
Yeah,
and she uses AI for everything on that. You don't even see her; it's all AI.
Cool. Well, thanks again, Toby, for joining us, and thank you everybody else. And that is a wrap for tonight. And don't forget, we'll be doing I'll be doing another live with Wick and Lawrence on Sunday night. And you might want to check it out. It's gonna be really fun. So thanks a lot, everybody, and we will see you next time.